ליהודים הייתה אורה, הייתה אורה, ושמחה וששון ויקר. As Shabbat winds down, we join together in singing these words which come to us from the book of Esther. ליהודים הייתה אורה, הייתה אורה, ושמחה וששון שמחה. ליהודים, ליהודים הייתה אורה, הייתה אורה, ושמחה וששון ויקר. כן תהיה לנו, תהיה לנו, תהיה לנו. כן תהיה לנו, תהיה לנו, תהיה לנו. ליהודים הייתה אורה, הייתה אורה, ושמחה וששון ויקר. One more time. ליהודים הייתה אורה, הייתה אורה, ושמחה וששון ויקר.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve, for bringing us into this evening. Welcome. We just began with words that come from the book of Esther that we use to welcome in this period of Shabbat ending every week that speak of the idea that we as a Jewish community have had light for generations. And that even as darkness descends, we recall the idea that we still have light. And that was really the impetus for this entire conversation. That actually, even when we look around us and perhaps see darkness in many places, that our job, our heritage, our idea is to find the light and then to bring it forward over and over and over again. And so that's what we're going to do tonight. I would say welcome to our living room. We're so excited that you are here, and we are going to have an informal but supremely interesting conversation, which might be the longest that any of the five of us have gotten to talk to each other all weekend. So it's going to be great. We're really excited about this. And so we asked each of our speakers, who are going to in a moment introduce themselves as they kick off what we're going to start with. We asked each of them to answer first a question. What is bringing them light right now in the Jewish world in particular? I think we spend an inordinate amount of time bemoaning. We're very good in the Jewish community at the oys. We're excellent at it. But actually, it behooves us to find the other side. And so that was our first question, is what is bringing you light right now as you look into the Jewish community? Who would like to start?
Rock, paper, scissors.
That's right.
So I'll start by saying, and this is not a throwaway, this Shabbat brought me a tremendous amount of light. And I have to say, I didn't totally see it coming. I travel around to a lot of synagogues around the country, and it is always the case that I find in the celebration of Jewish life that takes place in synagogues and in JCCs and in Hillels, So much more dynamism and joy and curiosity than you would hear in all of the public anxiety about those institutions, their limitations, the systems, the failures. When you actually step into Jewish community, you see Judaism alive and well. You see creativity, like what's taking place here under your leadership. You see inspiration. You see people show up to cry together in shul and to laugh together and to sing together. And it actually requires of us as Jewish leaders who operate on a national scale to remember that that's taking place, even as a lot of the same fears and concerns that we hold as Jewish leaders inhabit the minds and hearts of so many people in this room. But when we actually step into Jewish life, it's extraordinary what's taking place. And I would say a second piece that I see, that I felt here in this community, but I see in our programs at the Hartman Institute around the country, is that even as the anxiety level for American Jews has grown about what's taking place in Israel, what's taking place in America, what's taking place between us, what has also risen is not just the kind of lizard brain mentality of defense and protection, but curiosity. We have seen a massive influx of young people coming to Hartman Institute programs. We have launched a rabbinic ordination program with exceptional leaders who wanted to take the next step in terms of their leadership for our community. And we've seen just a groundswell of passion and curiosity for wisdom and depth. And since the Jewish people has been carried for so long by that, by wisdom and depth and actually showing up in community, I feel incumbent on reminding myself that it's through those positive expressions of what we're about that leadership is most exciting, even if it's not the thing that, that generates the most headlines.
Amazing. Thank you.
Also not a throwaway, but you guys are great. I mean, I just felt so much warmth and beauty in what was created this weekend. And when you look at why we're here, to have two clergy who are starting in these senior roles to lead this institution for probably decades, it's really something special. You've set yourselves up for a long time of having joy and leadership and music in this beautiful home. Look, thank you. My mother. I work with teens, so my light is knowing that there is an army of young people who care, who are curious, who are proud, coming up from wherever they are, looking for community, looking to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And we see that more than ever because of what's going on in the world. They want to be someplace where people care about them. They want to be someplace where they feel safe to be themselves. They're finding that in not just BBYO, in summer camps, in things that put values and community at the center of what they do and what they are. So, right now, I can only speak for BBYO, on almost every night between now and January 1st, somewhere in the world, a group of teens are getting together in a basement, in a synagogue, in a JCC, to do something Jewish together. And that's pretty special. So I'll leave it at that and hand it off to Angela.
Well, I have to also begin with the Shabbat. It was moving, inspiring, and I do really feel filled with light. I will share one piece just to say something different than my amazing colleagues, because I will just say ditto to what they said. I was very touched to see how many other rabbis have been a part of this weekend. Rabbis that are not from this congregation, rabbis that are from other denominations. Someone who's an Orthodox rabbi introduced themselves to me, and I thought, that is unusual. And I don't know if you take it for granted here in Denver that happens. That is not so typical. And I think it's a testament also to the two of you that you have those kinds of relationships. And of course, there are other interfaith clergy who also came, and that's beautiful and important. I will say that is something that I have seen post-October 7th happening more also in a place like New York City. It started with things like missions that rabbis took on to Israel in the weeks after October 7th. I met Orthodox colleagues that have synagogues less than a mile away from me that I'd never met before. But we went and traveled to Israel together. Then we actually built really deep, powerful relationships. And it was really wonderful that our October 7th commemorations as a New York community were actually done across all the denominations and as a community, which is not something we had done before. So I will share that kind of cooperation. I also now regularly do my Yom HaZikaron into Yom HaAtzmaut commemoration, which we call our Tekes Ma'avar, which is the liminal moment between those two holidays. I do with the largest Orthodox synagogue on the east side, the largest conservative synagogue on the east side, and Central, the three of our communities now. We alternate between our homes. It's our third year in a row doing this now. And we hosted this year, but Kehilat Jeshurun hosted it last year, and Park Avenue Synagogue the year before that. So that's also something that is a newer outgrowth. And I think it says really wonderful things about our community, because with everything that we are facing externally, we have to be together in this as a Jewish community. So that's the first. The second I just want to say is we have seen at Central, but I know that this is the case actually across the country because I'm hearing it from my rabbinic and cantorial colleagues, that there has been a influx, a more than doubling of the number of people who want to actually join the Jewish people through conversion. Our program at Central Synagogue, which already was quite large with like about 150 students, we have more than 300 students in our Center for Exploring Judaism. And the number of, it is every conversion that has happened after October 7th is like you would cry listening to people talk about why they are joining the Jewish people. And it's not just because of that TV show. Nobody wants this. That started even before the TV show.
Nobody wants it.
Nobody wants that.
That's right.
Anyway, so there are many, many amazing bright lights that we are seeing.
Well, obviously, this weekend has been, I think in particular for us, such a joyful experience. And I will be transparent with you for a minute. Rabbi Sachs had to really explain to me what is the purpose of an installation, because I was the last clergy person to arrive at Temple Emanuel before this current iteration of our clergy team really evolved. And I think I had an installation, but I don't remember much about it. And it was in it, right? And it's so she taught me a lot about what it is that we do here and why. And what I learned about the opportunity for this kind of moment and celebration is that it's an opportunity to celebrate all of us, a whole congregation, a whole community, and what it is that we are doing. And a leadership transition is maybe the least about the leaders and the most about the people who are invested in the community and who are making choices about what they want their space to look like. And it has been an inordinate honor for us to be along on that journey and to be the recipients of some of that vision and to be partners in it with so many of you. And I didn't totally understand it until we were in it, which is usually how it works for me. And to see what it really feels like to celebrate our community, not just at Temple, but our Denver community, which is so important to me, and to see the pluralism, that is where I come from, is pluralistic youth movements and pluralistic day schools. And this is really the first movement experience I've ever had, is Temple Emanuel. And so to see all of our friends together, and I will add to that, to have the three of you here is really a joy. And in particular, for me to have Matt here, who could tell you the most embarrassing stories about me as a teenager, but he won't, because I've already
after party.
threatened him.
Also, I said no. So
Thank you.
that's great. Yeah.
I'm so grateful for you for so many reasons. And to have these parts of our lives come together in one sanctuary is really beautiful. And I think that is, I don't have a second external joy, because I think that to know that we as a Jewish community have within us the capacity and the need and the desire, even when the world feels like a lot, and it is a lot. And many of you, we're responding to the world around us all the time. Many of you brought donations of food for our food pantry, our JFS Weinberg food pantry, who is in severe need right now. We encourage you to keep doing that because as the world goes through what the world is going through, it impacts people, and we could drown in it. And it's so Jewish that we don't ever stop thinking about the things that are hard and that we find every opportunity to celebrate, and we can do both. We've been doing both for several years, and this is just another testament to how beautiful and important that feels in this community. And so I feel filled with joy because we can have joy even as we worry and even as we help. We can feel both.
Well, one of the great things about a senior rabbi partnership is that the whole idea is that we don't have to repeat things that the other one has already said. So I feel like I am totally fine with that repeating exactly how much joy this entire weekend has brought me. So thank you so much for that. Yes, all good, all good. No, but really and truly, any number of things. First, I think some of you know that last night, in addition to the beautiful service that we had in our sanctuary, we also had kids programming throughout the building so that people could come and be in the sanctuary. And we had so many children of all different ages, from like 3 to 15, running around our building, totally safe and supervised. But it brought me great joy how safe they feel here to be themselves in every space and to really own the sanctuary and own the rest of the synagogue. So that is bringing me a lot of joy right now. One of the great privileges we have here at Temple Emanuel is to have an early learning center. And if you are ever feeling sad about what is happening in the world, just walking through the early learning center and seeing the youngest minds of the next generation, both, I will say, because we're a pluralistic early learning center, both our Jewish young ones and all of our community young babies, so amazing to see that they are just completely beautifully oblivious to everything else that is going on and doing all the things they're supposed to do, like poking each other in the eye and licking each other, and like that feels very reassuring that we're all building immunity together. I will also say that, to Rabbi Buchdahl's point, one of the things that I love about this conversation is that this is not just pluralism within the synagogue world and not just pluralism and interfaith within the faith world, but that Jewish organizational life has been coming together in a much more fruitful way. And to have people from synagogues and institutions and engagement organizations really wanting to partner with each other instead of battle over attention within the Jewish community, because we know that what is happening right now requires unity and requires the best thinking of all of our kinds of engagement with the Jewish world has been really wonderful. And that is happening, I think, both in big places and in places where the institutions have been trying to figure out how to work with each other for a long, long time. So that has been bringing me great joy as well. I would just segue from there into, go ahead, Rabbi.
As we segue, I'll just let you know that there are index cards that are being passed around by the illustrious Steve Stark, who is standing right here. And if you have an index card and you have a question and you'd like to write those questions down and hand them to Steve, you are welcome to. If you don't have a card and you need one, you can find him or throw a hand up, and one of the professional team will come and find you, as we want to include you in this conversation. And here at Temple, we do that through the art of the index card.
It's a good art. Sorry. So one of the things that I think we have talked a lot about in the Jewish community in response to the last couple of years in particular, is this idea of the surge and of this coming back into Jewish life. And I'd just be curious, like how has that shown up for each of you in your own institutions, and where does that feel like it really is the source of light? What complications is that bringing? What does that look like?
Sure. I think one of the first big challenges for young people was COVID, to be quite honest with you. And one of the saddest things that happened was those in our community who couldn't do their bar bat mitzvahs due to COVID, this would have been their junior year in high school to go to Israel. So we have right now thousands of kids that did not get that amazing rite of passage that we create for them. And I think they're hungry for something. Like, we didn't lose those kids by any stretch of the imagination. They found connection in different ways that external forces may not have allowed them to find that connection. They figured out how to find it themselves. So looking just, again, I could speak for BBYO, year after year since COVID, we've been up. Our first year classes have been 5,500 kids, 5,700 kids. They're growing really at a pace that is, it's something worth noticing. And I'll tell you one other thing that's interesting. Kids around the world are trying to find connection to each other. This is no longer, I don't think any of our Jewish institutions are no longer thinking, specific to a geographic community. I mean, certainly you've proven that with what you've done online. You're all over the world at this point. The technology has unleashed something very positive. I know there's a lot of negatives to it, but the opportunities to connect are greater than ever before. As you said, the curiosity is greater than ever before, and I think we're all seeing numbers that are going up as a result.
I heard a great insight this week, actually, which helped me think about this issue a little bit differently. So when the organized Jewish community noticed this phenomenon in the first couple of months after October 7th, which are called the surge, it did so in a very classic institutional way, which was noticing that people were showing up to Jewish institutions in ways that they hadn't before. People showed up to synagogues in droves in those first few weeks after October 7th. Jewish students showed up to Shabbat dinner at Hillel's in record numbers. And the mistake of thinking about surge based on that kinds of participation is that that's really an institution thinking in terms of its own safety and survival. Great, we're going to get more people and then we're going to trap them, right? And that's not really how American Jews behave. American Jews are not that institutional. We've seen that over time. And I heard this from Dr. Felicia Herman this week, who certainly could have been on this panel with all of us, a great Jewish leader in New York, who said a different thing that also happened around that time, which is harder to quantify, was what she called an awakening, which was a vast number of Jewish people in North America and all over the world feeling a twinge of attachment or pain, what our colleague Michal Biton wrote in an article, the pain that you're feeling is peoplehood, right? That sense of being part of something, which sometimes shows up in happy moments and oftentimes shows up in moments of tragedy, that's something else, and it might actually be more enduring. Because there are reasons why people stop coming to synagogue when they don't feel that the world is in crisis in the same way, but it doesn't mean that those feelings have gone away and that they may still be searching for ways to be attached that don't show up in surveys around their institutional participation. And that's a harder thing to notice, but I think it's more incumbent on us to look for it and listen for it. In ourselves, what feels different to me as a Jew now than it was a couple of years ago? And where is there ripeness or opportunity to build on that? And especially to notice it in young people, because if you track young people based on institutional participation, you're going to be disappointed. But if you track what are the ways in which they're thinking about the world differently, about their attachments, about their Jewishness, that may pave something that creates opportunity for institutions like all of ours to say, when you're ready, we're going to be here and prepared to absorb you in ways that are different than just tracking whether they're actually in the building.
Well, go ahead. No, you go.
I would just add to that and just say that, yes, I mean, we didn't just see a surge in participation in the weeks or months after. I would say that this is now a new normal, that like in our services on Friday night, we will have people up to the balcony, literally every Friday night. So the floor is filled and there will always be people up in the balcony. So hundreds and hundreds of people coming every week. I think that every store sold out of like Magen David necklaces. Like people are also wanting outward identifiers of their Jewishness, which at a time when it doesn't always feel always safe even sometimes to be on a subway or whatever else with a Star of David, I just see people wanting to identify as Jewish in a way that I think is wonderful and beautiful. I will add to that sense of, the sense of the pain of peoplehood, that I had shared the story that I learned at Hartman that comes from the Talmud about these conjoined twins. And the rabbis are wondering, of course, do the two-headed, two heads, one body, right? Do they have to wrap two sets of tefillin or just one? Because that's, what rabbis care about. And they use as a test this idea that if you pour boiling water on one head and the other head screams, then you'll know that they are one person, not two, right? And I think that I actually shared that story 6 weeks before October 7th in my Rosh Hashanah sermon, and that was when I thought that we were in an existential crisis over judicial reform. I wish we were back to just that. We might actually be back to that. I think we are, unfortunately. But I wasn't convinced that my community felt it, but 6 weeks later, everyone felt like, oh my gosh. And what it reminded us of was this sense that we actually might have 7 million Jews in Israel and 7 million Jews in America. It's a two-headed community with 1 million Jews everywhere else. But when that other head was in pain, we recognized that we shared a soul, that we were really one family, in a way that I agree has really stayed with us. And I want to share one last piece of this, which was philanthropically, I have noticed something very different with my people, which is that it often was, if you think about and you track people who had much more right-wing views, they disproportionately gave their money to Israel and Jewish causes, and more liberal and progressive folks actually gave to much more universal causes. Well, I suddenly saw people in my community realize, I want to actually put my money where my mouth is in the Jewish community, and I saw gifts, and I mean big and small, but a notable one was members who have been extremely philanthropic in the rest of the world, never gave significantly to Jewish causes, and decided, and it's a businessman who has a very high profile, and he decided, with some heat from his company, who said, maybe you don't want to give a giant gift to Israel right now. And he decided that his first gift he would ever put his name on, he's given a lot of giant gifts, but the first time he would put his name on was to rename the medical school at Tel Aviv University. And it wasn't just an act of philanthropy, that was an act of standing with in a public way that he would have never done before October 7th, I think. And so I just think that that's also just another piece of this.
One of the follow-up questions that I would ask, in particular, Yehuda, to you, is when we think about the difference between participation and identity, or program and identity, I think that so much of what feels important in this moment is helping people to feel grounded in that identity. We want that awakening of Jewish identity, I would imagine, to be a product of connection, and to be a product of whether it's a connection to other people or a connection to heritage or to a particular piece of where they come from. How do we help ground that? If it's not organizations, which we don't want to trap them, I think we don't want to trap anyone and make them stay, but how do we help create programs or practices or experiences that ground identity in being a part of something bigger? And I think we're thinking about that here, certainly. How do we, I don't think the word is capitalize on it, but how do we help in this quest? I don't know what you guys are doing or if you're thinking about those pieces.
And I think one thing that we could be healthier at as a Jewish community is helping certainly young people see that to participate in Jewish life can involve a vast number of entry points, and that requires of the institutional landscape to not always be competing over those entry points, right? So, we run a teen program for 350 Jewish teens who are really passionate about learning. I think there could be more of them, but we're not going to reach, how many teens are involved at BBYO in America? 23,000. We're not going to run a program for 23,000. Not only are we not competitors, but by working alongside each other and respecting each other and speaking positively about one another, we're actually signaling that wherever you want to go in Jewish life, there is a point of entry, right? So that the part of the reason why institutions get caught in the theory of I need to catch them is because we think our institutional future is identical to the Jewish people's future. This is just a trap of how institutions think. We're scared, we need to keep the doors open, and we think in terms of those numbers. But if we think collectively, what's important for the future of Jewish life, it's going to be a vast number of doors of entry. And we also have to educate that way to our young people, that we're interested in connecting them to the big, grand, majestic story of the Jewish people of the past, to the idea that Judaism has wisdom to share and to guide their lives in ways that might surprise them, that their teachers sometimes don't have the answers to hard questions. When they can see that modeled, then they feel like there's dignity and nobility in belonging to the Jewish people, and that we feel a sense of pride and success, as I'm sure you do. If you have teens who graduate from this synagogue and find themselves somewhere else in the Jewish world but living lives of richness and fulfillment, victory. And we have to think in that type of expansive way to move beyond just what happens in my particular institution as a measure of what we're doing to invest in the future of Jewish life.
I would also just say I know that there's been a lot of focus, obviously, on the threats against us, and I think we're not going to stop fighting anti-Semitism. But I was really heartened to hear when I've been on 3 college campuses already recently in this book tour that I'm on, and when I was at Brandeis, the head of the Brandeis Hillel was saying, they don't want to come to anti-Semitism program. The parents want us to run anti-Semitism programming, but the kids actually want to do more Jewish. They want to do more Jewish together. They want to learn together. They do this beautiful Havdalah every week and then do a song session and hang out with each other afterward. I joined in that, and it was so beautiful. And I thought to myself, this is what we want them to be doing. So it's like, just be, I think Brett Stevens said this when he was actually at Central. He said, just be 10% more Jewy. That's what we need. It's like, just do a little bit more Jewish than you were doing before, but the joyful kind that gives meaning and shape and all of that to our lives. And so I think that is what we want to, quote, capitalize on and remind them of why we're in this in the first place and the joy and meaning it brings.
Well, so
how do you expect me to be 10% more Jewy?
Okay, Yehuda, you can just do 2% more. It's a hard bar.
You have to balance that on a curve. Otherwise, we could end up in a really awful place.
Well, so just as a quick follow-up to that, we got a question from Addie, Ruby, and Leora, 3 of our amazing teens here at Temple, that asked, what is your message to youth or to high schoolers about how to combat anti-Semitism? And I'll just say on behalf of our teens, I think they're living these beautiful and powerful and involved Jewish lives. We have 100 middle school and high schoolers that are here every Sunday to volunteer or to work in our religious school of their own volition. It's like remarkable how many of the teens want to be in this building, and they are feeling this, and they are experiencing all kinds of different anti-Semitic, vibes, if not acts. And I think that it feels really tangible to them. What are some of the things that we might tell them? Because they've heard a lot of what we already have to say.
That's right, we're done. Your turn. That's right.
Not an expert of anything. Look, I think you fight anti-Semitism with pride. And what I would tell young people is to dig deep into what you stand for as a Jew, to figure it out for yourself. And if you understand that, who you are, where you fit into the great Jewish story, you won't need to fight. It won't matter. You'll be strong. That's where I'd leave it.
I might add that, I think, first of all, I'd want to say to our teens that this is, unfortunately, the world's oldest hatred, and I do not think that we're going to end it, and it is not your job to end it. We would never ask an Asian child to say, you have to solve anti-Asian hate, or to a black child, you have to fix racism in America. I don't want to put it on you to say you have to solve this. That being said, I think that when you hear something or when you see something, you might want to approach it not first with, that's a terrible person or that's an anti-Semite, but to actually maybe begin by saying, that's interesting you say that. Can I tell you how I hear it? Or just to engage the conversation and not to think that someone that you have met is forever going to hold that view. I just want to say that I had lunch with an incredible person, Imam Abdullah Antepli, who started a Muslim leadership initiative at the Hartman Institute. He will say he's a self-proclaimed recovering anti-Semite. He grew up in Turkey with all sorts of anti-Semitic views, and it's only because he met Jews who changed his mind that he became, I would say now, maybe one of the most vocal, important Muslim champions of fighting anti-Semitism in the country. And that's because people didn't just say, when he said probably or thought anti-Semitic things, we wrote you off completely. So some of this is we have to be willing to engage. And if you try engaging and they continue to give you hate, then maybe that's not a person that's worth your time. But I would also say that it's, we're each going to stand up, and I know that I'm already proud of you for asking the question, but I also don't want this to be your burden.
Yeah, I want to complement that by saying, the problem of anti-Semitism in our societies has two things. It's anti-Semites, and those people are hard to defeat. And really, I feel like anti-Semitism is not a problem that Jews created. It shouldn't be ours to solve. Anti-Semites should solve it like this. But the second condition that you need in order for anti-Semitism to flourish is not just anti-Semites, it's you need wider societal tolerance for anti-Semitism. And that's where we actually have the opportunity to do some work. And I think it's akin to what you were talking about, which is not assuming necessarily that somebody who falls into the trap of believing something that they shouldn't have believed because they read it on Instagram or TikTok is necessarily rooted in a deep bias or hatred of the Jewish people. In working towards building stronger cultures of democracy, working across difference, building allies and friendships with folks of different racial, ethnic, and faith communities, all of those things lower the temperature and make anti-Semitism less likely to take root in our society. So I think that's where the work is possible. And you're right, when you confront real anti-Semitism, your job is to protect yourself from it and insulate yourself from it, and sometimes to push back. But oftentimes, the real window of opportunity is helping us build a better social fabric here in America for Jews that we helped build, actually, in this country, and to make it as though anti-Semitism once again becomes an aberrant activity that other people engage with as opposed to a normalized activity.
So I think so many of these questions are also engaging the idea of the dual peoplehood conversation between Israel and the United States. And yes, there is some of the anti-Semitism that we are experiencing as a resurgence because anti-Semitism is lying under the surface and it's always there. And some of it is because of the very real news of what is happening in Israel. And I know that so many of the cards that we have in our laps right now are asking about where are we in this idea of how in this moment do each of you and us also want to be thinking about, like, where does Israel fit into Jewish identity in this moment? Not talking about like the biggest question of forever and ever, but like right now. Where do we want to put that?
One of you want to answer?
Yeah.
Look, I think one of the things, I know you're looking, that's like, we know for a long time that part of the reason we've gotten ourselves into this mess is because Israel has been encoded for too long for us as American Jews as largely a political conversation. And as a result of that, it has gotten caught up in all of the other phenomena of our politics that divide us. So we are divided as Americans along partisan political lines. Israel now fits into that paradigm, and it's pushing a lot of people away because they identify Israel as being part of a politics that they don't share. And we've known for a long time that the texture of what it means for Jews to be in relationship with one another across geography actually has nothing to do with politics. That's what we call Jewish peoplehood. It existed prior to the creation of the State of Israel. It's been intensified over the last number of years because as opposed to being a really global people who thought of ourselves as networked to one another, we are, and I mean this in the tool sense of the word, we are a bipolar people. We live on really two centers in the Jewish people, in the world, and we feel a sense of loyalty and attachment to this place, which is getting in the way of the texture of Jewish peoplehood. And one of the things that pains me is that even many American Jews who care a lot about Israel can't really speak the language of Jewish cultural production of Israel, of the flourishing of Judaism in so many complicated ways. We just understand Israel through the prism of whether we currently like its politics or we currently don't like its politics. So part of what we have to get back to is normalizing a different conversation in Jewish life about Israel that doesn't feel constantly destabilized by the news cycle. And so even in this moment, and especially in this moment, when people feel a sense of awakening because of tragedy, our responsibility is to say, that thing that you're feeling is attachment, but now let me flesh it out so it doesn't only show up when you're in pain or when you're ecstatic about an Israeli military victory. Those can't be the indicators of what we consider to be something central to our Jewishness. Otherwise, we're just allowing it to be captive by things that are really beyond our control.
Well, I would just say that, to add to your point, many of you know that I was at the World Zionist Congress about, 6 days ago? I don't know, something like that. And putting aside the very complicated understanding of the Congress itself and what does it represent, I wanted to connect to, Yehuda, a piece that you said before about what does it mean to understand, to read the big national picture of how terrible everything is or the polarization of everything, and then actually be on the ground and watch the conversations happening. And some of you may know that the news that came out of the World Zionist Congress was not great. It did not, what was being reported back to us here was lots and lots of terrible fighting, lots of absolutely no business being handled. And the reality is that actually for those of us who are in the room, that was not true. There were tremendous fruitful partnerships that were created throughout the Congress. There were many resolutions that were voted on almost unanimously that showed broad unity throughout the communities that were there, which did represent a pretty wide spectrum of the Jewish community, both here in the United States and with people who were fluent in Israeli communities also. And so that was just a reminder for me in particular that just as we hope that the national conversation that sometimes likes to lean on the negative doesn't dictate what is actually being said about our communities, so too with Israel. You have to be very careful and remember that the story is probably at least 25 times more complex than what is being reported, and let yourself imagine what the joy might be there and not just accept the sadness.
I mean, I think Yehuda's answer was said much better than I could have said, and that's basically it, which is, but to put it in simple terms, I would say I think it's a multi-dimensional country, and I think we are too often engaging with only one dimension of it. And I think for me, one of the ways that I stay in it, even when it's hard, or why I feel so deeply tied, is because it's about personal relationships. I mean, I literally have family there, but in addition to that, I have people who I know who are fighting to build an Israel that I would be so proud of. And it's those continued relationships and seeing those people and supporting them that makes me feel so deeply engaged in the Zionist project. And I think that and it's having a shaliach at Central who makes us feel tied and connected and is teaching us from a personal place. I think even if you can't go to Israel yourself, it is bringing in speakers. It's even listening to podcasts and hearing stories. And I love the Promised podcast. That's like one of my favorite, because you will get a sense of like the great, chutzpahdik and like amazing, integration of Judaism in all life in that podcast. That's one of my favorite ways to feel connected to Israel. And it's such a simple thing to do, to listen for an hour, these amazing stories coming out of Israel. So those kinds of things help remind you that Israel is so much more than its political structure. And I do still think that even if you are upset with the government, I do think that Israel is the most important sovereign project of the Jewish people. And I don't think that we as Jews can just walk away from it.
I think that this question is representative of a lot of the questions that we deal with and that we think about in Jewish life, which is there's a million different ways that we could engage with this, and with this particular topic and with many other particular topics, and many of them are hard, and many of them are personal, and many of them feel really emotionally charged for us. And for the three of us on this end, I'll just point out that I know that one of the things that has been complicated about, I don't know, the role of the rabbi in general, but particularly in the last several years, is figuring out what we're supposed to say and what we can say and what we have to say and what we are morally compelled to say from the bima, which is not new. That is not new for rabbis and for clergy. And as we think about, for a second, the reason that we're all gathered here and the role of the rabbi, which has evolved over the centuries in Jewish life, what do you wish that it would be? If there's anything that you could change about it, and this, you guys can answer this too. We'll take it as wild criticism and constructive feedback. But if you could change, or you could grow, or you could adapt, or you wouldn't, the role of the rabbi in the Jewish world, what would you see it become?
Is this being live streamed? No, okay, here we go. I mean, I obviously think about this all the time. I do really think that, first of all, I think that we are primarily teachers of our tradition. That is what I think I have the authority to teach on. When people were asking me, call for a ceasefire, I was like, I don't know that this is the right time for Israel. I'm not a military strategist. I can talk about some of the moral issues that are at play here, but I'm not gonna go into areas that are not my area. And I think that I also don't think it's good to be political pundits. That being said, I think that this line of what is a moral voice and what becomes political, I have learned this to be really true. When people agree with you, they're like, thank God you had a moral voice on that. And when they disagree with you, they're like, Rabbi, you were so political. And it sounds like it's funny, but it's actually really hard because, issues of immigration, there's a moral issue here. You have to speak out about what's going on. If I speak about it and people are really against the way I speak about it, they're like, that was such a political sermon. And so this is a hard line. I am very committed to the idea that when I speak from the pulpit about something which could be seen as political, that first of all, I am approaching it with the humility of both teaching it as much as I can from the way I believe our text is teaching us, and often our text doesn't just give us a single view. It's usually giving us a multivocal view, and I try to offer that. Whenever I'm offering a position on something, I will take the very Jewish position of offering the best representation of the opinion I don't agree with first. Because when I offer that, even if people disagree with where I land, they will say, well, she at least grappled with my opinion and my viewpoint, and she offered it with respect. And so that often helps people hear it, even if they don't agree. I think that it is a very dangerous line. I just want to be on the record that I think it's an incredibly dangerous line for rabbis, pastors, ministers to endorse a political candidate. I want to say that the separation, I cannot tell you how deeply critical the separation of church and state has been for the protection of religious minorities and Jews in America. It has been one of the things that's made America exceptional for the Jewish community. And when I say that, that doesn't mean I'll never talk about politics. I will talk about things that play out in the political field, but I'll talk about a particular policy. That's very different than saying, vote for fill in the blank. And I just want you to imagine how quickly this could devolve. And I say how quickly it could devolve, but I want to say it's already happening, where a pastor might say, tell their entire congregation, vote for so-and-so, and then that leading candidate might say, well, if you get your whole congregation to vote, I'll help take care of your schools, or fill in the blank. By the way, that's already happened in parts of New York, where there's protection that's happening when promises of the entire community's vote is going that way. That doesn't just hurt democracy, that actually distorts Judaism. And what it does to rabbis is it turns us into political bureaucrats, or you lose complete trust as moral voices. So it's bad for democracy, it's bad for Judaism for rabbis to endorse candidates specifically. But I do think that we still have to be in the political arena at times, because politics are often the way that our love and care gets played out in public. And so there are going to be times that we talk about that. But I will tell you, I like to talk about more spiritual topics. And when I do enter and venture into this, I do it very carefully and selectively.
The biggest investment that we make at Hartman is in rabbis, in rabbinic training, in support for rabbis. It's the biggest investment we make. It is the least philanthropically supported, which is a super interesting thing. Everybody knows we need rabbis. We need a stronger rabbinic ecosystem. We need to strengthen the pipeline. But there's a strange dynamic in the Jewish community of, what Daniel Hartman calls a kind of autoimmune disease, where synagogues consume the rabbis that they need, and where the Jewish community doesn't quite know how to invest in getting the moral and spiritual leaders who actually are going to help the Jewish community confront its challenges. But we learned something really interesting from our work in Israel, where 10 years ago we started a rabbinic ordination program, and part of its objective was to actually circumvent or bypass the monopoly that the chief rabbinate has on issues of religion and state in Israel. And one of the things we discovered is that Israelis, overwhelmingly, secular Israelis, they want rabbis in their lives. They just don't want the chief rabbinate in their life. And when do they need them? They know. They discover it. Yeah, well, thank you. They discover it particularly around moments of life cycle events. They're secular Jews, but they do want a rabbi to be there with them, to hold their hands when they're sick, to be there to help them bury their dead, when they get married, when they name their children, and so on and so forth. And it's been very powerful to help train a whole generation of rabbis across the denomination, including a term that we use freely at Hartman. It makes total sense, called secular rabbis, who speak the language of secularism, but do all of the same custodial work of sustaining the tradition, transmitting it to the next generation, and holding people through their lives and their choices that rabbis do exceptionally well. And if you can see that happening in secular Israel, we know that we need that too. And so the flip side of that question is not just what do rabbis need to be, it's how do we as a community create the ecosystem in which the rabbis that we need can thrive. What are we willing to let our rabbis be not great at so that they can be great at the things that they're really good at, right? And usually those things are, as you said, teaching Torah and caring for people and providing moral guidance. And if we can kind of wrap our head around that, we can create the conditions for exactly the rabbis we need and want to really thrive.
Do you feel like that is different now in this moment in history than it was, say, 70 years ago, when, particularly in the Reform movement, there was a real emphasis on ascendancy of political moralizing from the pulpit, that became what the rabbinate was about? Do you feel like that has been a shift, or that we should be trying to make a shift?
I think there were two things that were really different 70 years ago in the rabbinate. One was, I think there's been a decline in respect for public servants in general in this country. It's almost a natural consequence of capitalism. So a lot of people just don't choose these kinds of roles that we see, that I revere you all, rabbis. I really do. I see this as one of the most noble things that a Jew can do, is to raise their hand and say, I'm willing to be a chain in this tradition and give it to others. But something has declined in the reverence that we give to rabbis, and that changes the field. But the second thing is Jews were trapped in membership. You had to belong to a synagogue in the 1950s, because if you didn't belong to a synagogue, worse than being a Jew in America was being an atheist, because it meant you were a communist. And so Jews had to belong to synagogues, and that created conditions for rabbis to be able to do a lot more of what they wanted and get away with it, right? So now you have to play in a different dynamic where you're always relating to people who can choose to leave. And that puts a totally different pressure on how the rabbi can actually get up and say to a congregation things that are hard to say, but might be the things that people need to hear.
We're going to take just a couple more questions. I heard you say, Rabbi Buchdahl, that you prefer to engage in like the more spiritual work, and that sometimes you are distracted from that or you are unable to access that because of so many of the other things that you might be navigating. What kind of spiritual practices move you the most? And I actually think that that's a really important question that maybe we all can share a little bit. And thinking about originally where we wanted to go in this conversation was like, what brings you light? And so spiritually speaking, not just communally speaking, what brings you light?
I read a wonderful book a few years ago. It was a book on awe by Dr. Keltner, and he basically took this study, a scientific study across 26 countries of what makes people feel awe. And I'm going to guess that you could guess many of them. Things like nature. You guys live in Colorado, so you know what it's like. I'm sure many of you might have moved here because you were like, these mountains, I feel awe. Music, which we experienced a lot this weekend, the awe that you feel from music. Moral beauty, which is the number one thing that makes people feel awe. That's basically acts of selflessness, generosity, courage that you see ordinary human beings doing in extraordinary ways. So I would say I am in the awe business. We are in the awe business. And essentially what we're trying, and by the way, birth and death, of course, also one of the 8 top ways that people feel awe. So we are really in the work of not only experiencing awe because we are walking people through moments of awe with regularity, but we are also trying to create experiences of awe for people and helping draw their attention to awe that might be in front of them that they don't even notice. So in many ways, that to me is the spiritual work. It is like helping people feel that sense of awe and wonder about the world. Of course, it's Heschel who kind of famously said that that was sort of the starting place of a religious experience, was a sense of awe and wonder. But it actually scientifically shows that when you experience awe and wonder, you do all the things that we want people to do in a religious life. It actually makes you more selfless. It actually dissolves your ego. It makes you feel more connected to something bigger than yourself. All of these things are what we want religious life to be for us. And we actually have incredible spiritual technologies within Judaism of experiencing this kind of wonder and awe. It's built into our prayer services. It's built into the way we do holidays and cycles. It's built into the way we're actually supposed to approach nature. All of this is built in. So this is the work that I want to be doing all the time. In many ways, I actually think it's the work that I do most naturally and that I love the most. It's when I'm the most in the flow. Of course, music is my first language for this, but there are many others. And when we are able to access that, I feel like we are shaping the world in a profound way with this, both this Jewish vocabulary, but also with this universal experience that I think is deeply profound.
Look, I took this question from a personal perspective, and I'm answering as a non-clergy. What you said earlier about walking through your preschool or your early childhood center in the morning, that's what motivates me. Seeing young people with all the potential in the world accomplish things they don't even know or think they could accomplish, that gives me a sense of meaning and purpose, and it's what motivates me to do what I do.
Yeah, ditto to that. And I think the most spiritual part of my life is the religious practice of my family in our home. A lot of my work is out in public, and it's not the music. It's just the words. But in my house, cooking for Shabbat with my kids, celebrating Jewish holidays, the intimacy of how Judaism shifts from being like things we talk about to just a language we live. That's where I find a spiritual anchoring in my life.
I would just add, right, that many things, but personally, one of the things I love about this space, this sanctuary in particular, is that I have had the great pleasure of hearing so many voices singing at the same time in this space. And that is a feeling of awe and spiritual lifting that I can't replicate on my own. It has to be done in community. And sometimes that's in our congregation, and sometimes it's when we fling open these doors and bring in everyone from the community, and we all sing together. Recently, we just did a program with the whole Jewish Colorado community when we marked the fact that so many of our hostages came home alive. And I don't know if you know this, but it is the biggest privilege for us to stand up here and watch you sing. That was so moving to hear and watch the congregation all engaged together, even though I know that so much of the sanctuary is focused on you watching this way. The privilege of us watching that way and hearing is remarkable, and that is something that brings me awe on a regular basis. Okay, well, I am flinging the doors open. No. So we know that we are concluding.
Happy to wrap.
Would you like to wrap?
I can answer this
go
question.
for it.
Well, my answer to this question and to your cue is I think that for me, so much of it is really grounded in Jewish ritual. And we are going to respond to whatever's going on in the world, and we're going to handle the things that we're going to handle, and we're going to take them. And every week, no matter what, and we make a lot of jokes about it in this community, Shabbat comes every freaking week, regardless of whether you're ready for it or not, and regardless of whether it feels like it's been a chaotic week in the world or it is a total, right? It just comes. And we bring Shabbat in with light, and then we have this moment of celebration or whatever it's going to be, whatever Shabbat is going to hold for us, and then we let it out with light, because we don't move from any of these pieces without adding light, and it is the regularity and the consistency of that and the Jewish ritual that for me is where I came from. I've been, right, like you said, like there's so much spirituality in doing that your whole life and being able to ground yourself in the repetitive moments of here's what we do because it's what we do. And we always do something. Jewish life is about ritual, and it's about action, and it's about consistency, and it's about doing it in community. And so we are going to officially end this installation weekend.
Not quite yet.
Oh, God.
You don't get exactly the last word every time, Emily. Last year, BBYO celebrated its 100th anniversary, and in doing so, thank you, we created 100 Centennial Awards that we are giving to 100 people who've defined and shaped our movement over time. And one answer to, I think, the institutional question that you were alluding to was maybe we should all be measured, all of us institutions, by the accomplishments of our students, of our alumni, of whatever, after they leave the institutions. And if that is in fact the measure, BBYO has done pretty good tonight. Emily, this is for you. And I have just one more special gift for you. We have one more special gift.
No.
Yes. Let's hear it.
As we enter Havdalah together, I'm going to invite everyone to rise as you are able.
Baruch atah
Have all you want.
Hamavdil ben kodesh lecho, yai lai lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai 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 yai lai lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 lai, yai lai lai, yai lai lai. Eliyahu hanavi, Eliyahu hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu hagiladi. A good week, a week of peace. May gladness reign and joy increase. A good week, a week of peace. May gladness reign and joy increase.
Do it.
Shavua Tov, everyone.
Shavua Tov.
Thank you all so much for being with us tonight and the whole weekend. Have a wonderful week.